So, welcome to Conversations That Matter, Lessons from Nepal. I have a great pleasure this evening to welcome Zara Balfour, who's an award-winning filmmaker. She has roots in Gloucestershire and has worked in Nepal over many years and has transferred the skills she learnt there into some important work she's doing also in Britain. And alongside her tonight is Phil Briggs, who is her partner in Snowlands, which is the charity they run together. And he is a former Marine commando and has other skills leading treks and outdoor experiences. And he'll say a bit more about that himself in the conversation. So we'll start with Zara, and it's a great pleasure to see you on the screen this evening. And could you tell me a little bit about what was your journey to making this amazing film, which we'll see a trailer of shortly, and making films and meeting the mountains and all those things?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me tonight. So the journey started in about 2012, where I was sent over to Nepal. I used to do a lot of films for charities all over the world, and the people that were the sort of big companies who were funding charities would employ me to go and film the work and report back on what had happened. And I got asked to go over to Nepal to film a very small charity that were building schools in rural Nepal, and just completely fell in love with Nepal. I actually think that was also the first place that I really fell in love with mountains as well. Like, I wasn't really a mountain person before that, but just being in, there's this remote part of Nepal, not the same area as the film, but an area called Katunje and Dading, which is about 1 day travel from Kathmandu. And just sitting there, at dawn, watching the mountains, I just completely started to understand why people love mountains and fell in love with them. And then I really liked the people that ran the charity in Nepal, as well as loving Nepal. And so stayed in touch with them. And actually, I remember on that trip, we were on a bus journey and they suddenly got a message from a school in Kathmandu that said, "Would you support us?" And it wasn't what they usually did, but the story of the kids was so amazing, that they educate these kids from the very highest Himalayas and they keep them there from age 4 to age 16. And the children are not in touch with their families because they can't be during their education, because where they come from is too remote. And that story just kind of blew my mind. And so that started the journey of making Children of the Snowland. And it was a really long journey, because we started our first proper filming trip for Children of the Snowland was in 2014. And then we filmed over about 2.5 years. So kind of in the run up to the children going home when they graduate from the school, age 16, to reconnect with their families who they hadn't seen for 12 years. And we filmed them about 1.5 years before that journey. And then I went on the journey with the children. And then also up to about 1.5 years afterwards, which was them kind of like processing what it had meant to them and seeing how it impacted their lives thereafter. And then kind of the film came out in cinemas, and we always wanted it to be a tool for helping Himalayan children, not just a film that would be entertaining in its own right and inspiring in its own right, which hopefully people think it is. I think it is, but also something that would help Himalayan children and years to come as well. And it ultimately, like when I was making the film, the journey home was funded by that first charity that I met. But they then actually, one of them got very sick, and one of them kind of couldn't really carry on alone. And so they stopped being able to help the kids. And it just sort of broke my heart by that point to think that more of these kids wouldn't get to go home because they weren't without support. There's no way financially they can manage it. And it was around that time when I was sort of thinking, well, what can we do? How can we keep this going? Beyond the film, what can we do? And it was around that time where I met Phil, and we spoke about it and started our NGO, Snowland Journeys.
Great, that's a perfect moment for me to introduce Phil and say, hello, Phil in Scotland.
Hi there, how you doing?
So would you like to tell us your version of how you came into the picture with Zara and her work?
Yeah, sure. Basically, it's very similar to what Zara said. I've been involved in expedition work and leading expeditions and guiding all over the world. I've been very fortunate in my career choice once I came out of the military. I also had a slight affinity with the Nepal due to working with the Gurkas also in the military as well. So again, I had some good friends in the serving in the Gurkha Rifles. And it's just by pure chance I met through a mutual friend of ours who's another expedition guide. That I met Zara, and Zara was telling me about this film. And all the years I've been working across in Nepal and guiding trips, I was completely unaware of these villages. I mean, I knew Upper Dolpa as a region, but I was completely unaware of the circumstances, and also that these children were basically transported away from their family for up to 12 years without any contact whatsoever. And as a parent, I was like, this can't be right. Some of these, in this day and age, this cannot be right. So basically, I watched Zara's film, which totally blew my mind. I said, right, okay, what can we do about this? So Zara and I started really speaking about this. What can we do together? How can we support these students? And then we started coming with ideas, and also what type of plan we can do to support the children and the families to bring this reunion together. I spent many years working with disadvantaged youth and groups that are really disengaged. One of their biggest issues was that parental breakdown or the breakdown in family relationships. So I thought, well, this is going on across the world, so we've got to do something from Nepal, and that's how it started. And obviously we started a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, COVID slowed things down a wee bit, but we still managed to support the children across in Nepal and get them home, which is our main priority, and always will be, is getting them back with their families after such a long time.
Thank you. That's really rich. Thank you so much. Can I just ask a question for my own interest? Is Gurka, is that a military label, or is it a kind of region, or how does it relate to Nepal?
Yeah, Gurkhas are a tribe in themselves. They are here. So I mean, but they come from different tribes, but they come together from different tribal areas. But it's usually 2 or 3 areas where they're recruited from. That's historically been the place that the Gurkha regiment has been actually recruited. But they're all from different tribes that come together under the Gurkha regiment, and they have various different sections of the army now, and they've been a massive part of the British Army for a long time now, and very, very important part as well.
Yes, they fought alongside in the Second World War, didn't they? Were very much a help.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, they've been with us a long time now.
Yeah, great, good. Okay, so well, I think what would be lovely if we could just see a trailer of the film now, Zara, and then we can draw out some of the themes and unpack a bit of the ideas that came through the film and your work. So thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, I'll just do a screen share now.
The mountain children, they have to choose between their family or education. The children have to come here to get education because there's no school in the village areas. Once they reach here, there is no way that they can go back.
I'm 17 years old, and I have been studying here nearly 11 years.
When I came here, I was 4 years old.
I was sad that I was apart from my mom and dad. They don't love me. I'm very happy to be the part of Snowland. But I really miss my mom.
Now I'm packing my bag.
I'm very excited about the journey.
I'm going home to see my parents.
I'm going to meet my father.
I will throw my bag and take a big hug with her, and I think I will cry a lot.
That time will be one of the best memory of my life.
The journey home, it's much physically and emotionally demanding the children have ever done.
How am I going to survive?
So the journey to my home is very dangerous. Today, it's very difficult.
I'm very nervous. I asked
asked my mother, why you send me away from here?
Thank you, Zara. So that gives people a little bit of a taste. I have to say that the film, when you view it at home, will be far better quality. Is because it's mediated through the Zoom tonight, so it's a little bit not quite so smooth as we normally see it. So it's interesting, having seen the whole film now and looking at the trailer, how it goes into such great depth. It's such a moving experience to journey with those young people. It's absolutely beautiful. And it does bring up some themes just in the little trailer, themes about family shattering in a way, family loss, and then having to be resilient. You can see the little children all being kind of showered en masse and in a built up environment. So would you like to say something about that aspect of the family and the change of environment that's so dramatic compared to the high mountains?
Yeah, I mean, it basically sort of happens twice in their lives. So I should probably say that there are no schools in the villages that they come from. And the reason for that is that teachers don't want to live there because there's no sanitation or transportation or communication. And so the school that's been set up in Kathmandu offers children from the very highest Himalayas a free education. But their families take them down at age 4 or 5, or, ask someone in the village to take them down, or, nominate children. There's actually a huge demand for education in the villages because all of the villagers want to change their subsistence farming lifestyle and move it forwards. And so the school is inundated with requests, and they can't take all the children, but they'll take as many as possible as they can afford to house and clothe and feed and educate, because they don't charge the families anything. So, it's really traumatic for the kids. I mean, there's, when you see the film, you'll see a story from Nima, the tall boy you just saw in the trailer there, and he explains how his father brought him down. He actually was 6 years old, and his father came down with him, brought him to the school and said to him, "Oh, I've got to have a meeting, just go and play for a bit." And so Nima went off to have a play, and then, a little while later was like, "Oh, I wonder where my father is," and went looking for his father in the office where his father had been having this meeting with the guru, and his father had gone. And that was it. That was the last time he saw his father in his life. So, incredibly traumatic for those kids to leave their families at that age. And it takes quite a while for them to then settle into the school, but then the school becomes their second family. And they really do look after each other well. They really, you can see the older children sort of showering the younger children, and they really take care of each other. And so school basically takes the place of family. But there is always still this underlying feeling in the children that, well, why don't we have parents? They might see films or something like that where they'll see families, and they kind of question, well, what's wrong with me? Why don't my mother and father want me? So there's always this kind of pain and a feeling of abandonment. And that's why the chance to go home, which the first chance they have to go home is when they're 16. And that's because it takes so long to get to their villages. It's from Kathmandu, it's an overnight bus ride, and then a plane trip, and then up to 15 days walking for 10 hours a day. Over extremely high mountain passes. I mean, to reach Nima's village, you have to go over 4 mountain passes that are like 5,000 meters each. It's almost the same height as Everest Base Camp, just to give you an idea of kind of how extremely remote these places are. And so the gap in education, the first chance they have in their education is when they're 16, when they finish their sort of GCSE equivalents and go home. And again, then it's like a reversal. It's like they're leaving their school family and going to the original family. So they kind of have this, I guess, two very, very difficult moments in their lives. But by going home, they kind of reconnect and reintegrate with their families. And then hopefully that link is then carried on forwards for the rest of their life. Like we've seen it largely is carried forwards as long as they get that chance to go home at 16. And that's like why we're so keen to continue to offer these kids the chance to go home.
That's fascinating. So, because when I was watching the film, it was very interesting, but it did, you say no sanitation, which makes it sound like it's going to be really kind of dirty. But I mean, maybe Phil, you could talk a little bit about the physical life of the villages far up in the high Himalayas. What's it like there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, very, very tough. I mean, there's often places I've managed to travel and guide, and I think, oh, I could live here, I could live there. But Ubadalpur is definitely a place that you can think, wow, there's just no way I could live here. It's such a tough life. I mean, it is hand to mouth. The people know there is bigger life and a bigger circumstances out with where they stay. But they just don't have, they're not literate, they don't have any money whatsoever. It's just completely hand to mouth feeding. They maybe only have 2 outfits that they have, and it's, like they swap the outfits between the villages. They really are poor, and it's such a hard living conditions up there. I mean, it's a really hard soil. They've got long winters. It's just a really, really tough life. And they know the only way they can break that, that cycle of poverty for their children is to give them this opportunity of an education. But they also hope that the children will come back and say, well, help me, how can you help me? And they don't want a big brain drain. They just want support and I think of ways that maybe they can make a bit of money or maybe they can have a better life. So it's a tough environment. And obviously, especially for us Westerners, not being used to altitude, even getting there is a task for Nima, for example, and he's Nepali, but because he hasn't been there for so long, well, one, the altitude was getting him, but also he couldn't speak the dialects because in Upper Dolpa they're very much Tibetan culture and speak Tibetan as opposed to Nepali, so he couldn't even converse with his family or his peers. So there's a hell of it really is a big ask to get these young people home and stuff and then settle into this area. So, but as far as staying there, I mean, it's stunning, don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful area, very challenging terrain. There's some beautiful temples and gompas there, as I call them, but you can understand why they want better for their children.
Thank you. I mean, one thing that I wondered was how do you manage with camera batteries and recording equipment and things? I mean, did you sort of fly down again and charge up, or how did you work with all the gear?
Yeah, it was really difficult. It really affected me because there's no electricity or anything. So we basically found some really cool solar backpacks. So you'd kind of strap them on or tie them to your other existing backpack, and they would have sort of storage units on them that we could recharge the cameras. But only small cameras. We couldn't use big professional film cameras. So we had to vary how we shot the film in Kathmandu. We were using kind of much bigger, higher quality cameras. And then on the trip, we had to take much smaller things. I mean, also because it's really tough. The journey is, as Phil said, it's really difficult. And so we didn't, we were walking obviously the whole way, and trying to carry a usual film equipment was pretty impossible. So we had to adapt all the cameras and everything. And we didn't take a lot of things that we would normally take. Normally you'd have a laptop and loads of hard drives to back up the footage to make sure you don't lose it. So at the end of each day, you back it up into 2 different places and you make sure you've got it in 3 places. And we couldn't do that. So we just had to hope for the best, hang on to our memory cards for dear life and just hope that they came back safely. So it was quite risky. And also, I mean, it actually suited the style of the film in a sense, that slightly kind of rough and ready approach to filmmaking on the move, because we also taught the children to self-film because we wanted them to really be able to open up and to be able to share their story. And Nepalis don't really open up. They're very kind of they're very sort of polite culture, and they're not used to talking about their feelings. So I mean, for about the first 6 months of interviewing the children, all I would get from them is, oh, I'm very excited, I'm the lucky one, I'm very excited to see my parents, and then over time, as they kind of got to know me and trusted me and opened up, they were like, well, actually, I think there's something wrong with me and my parents don't love me and I don't know why they sent me away. So so by self-filming with them, I think it kind of turned the cameras into their friends in a way. And it just sort of suited that slightly sort of bumpy, expedition-y kind of vibe. So we were kind of lucky. But yeah, not easy. And we did nearly lose our film equipment several times. So we had some few hairy moments.
Now with lockdown, we're all quite used to rather rough and ready camera, aren't we? People are used to self-filming quite a lot.
It's true.
So I was very touched by what you just said about how the Nepalis are quite reserved. I think obviously British people are known to be reserved as well, but in a very different sort of style. And it was very touching when the young girl goes back to her mum, and she's sort of quite bewildered that, you know, her mum just doesn't react in a kind of emotional way at all, and it's quite touching. That I thought that was.
Yeah, that was really surprising to her. I mean, you can see her surprise in the film, and our surprise too, because when we planned the film, it was almost like that would be the end of the film, you know. It's like this journey home, and then there's a great big like Hollywood hug, and everyone's happy, and then when we got there, and there's this very, very subdued, very formal welcome, it was just a real kind of non-event. And that was, at first, we were really disappointed in that, all of us, not just, she was obviously very disappointed that her mother didn't show more feelings towards her, and we were very disappointed on her behalf, but also in terms of film story and sort of plot points, we're like, oh, that didn't work at all. But then, you know, actually, I think the gentle evolution of what happens with her, she spends 3 months then with her mother, and they slowly learn about each other, and they learn about each other's culture, because obviously the kids are very different. Like for those that haven't seen the film, in Kathmandu, although it is still a fairly basic school, they do have access to like the internet and Facebook and WhatsApp, and they all love Beyonce and Justin Bieber, and you know, so they're kind of like Western kids in many ways, and so they were equally as shocked by conditions in the village and the culture in the village as we were. I'd say they're more similar in culture to us, actually, so it did take quite a long time for them, this relationship, to gradually kind of thaw and kind of reconnect and bond.
And I noticed that all the children were expected and welcomed and expected to work on the fields on this very, very dry, rocky ground, and had to work hard. They had to learn how to do weeding and planting. And did they have any preparation for that before, when they were in the school? Did they do anything practical like that at Snowlands in Kathmandu?
Not then, but go on. Yeah,
Phil.
No, I was just saying that was one of the things that we found, that they weren't getting that much preparation. They were getting a bit of preparation of getting the right equipment or etc. for going home. But one of the reasons that we wanted to develop more of a program, our reintegration program that we do, is basically to prepare the young people over several years. So it doesn't start just before they finish or just when they're finishing their exams. You know, this starts at a very early age. So we start getting them used to growing crops and things. So they've got that mindset already. And it also prepares them both physically and mental wise for this massive life journey. And on the flip side, we have a social worker that works for us out in Nepal. We also get them to visit the families to make sure that it's safe for the young people to go to these environments, and that to help support these parents and these, you know, the family, to say, like, you know what I mean, this stranger that you've not seen for 12 years. They're quite westernized, and so it's really helped that transition between both cultures coming together again, really. And so that's why we really try to build that up over a few years now, and that's our model going forward, because we know it really works for all concerned. So you may not have a mother as standoffish in future, because she'll be a bit more accepting that it's not a stranger, you know, like, you know. So that's our overall plan. And yes, but that's you just touched on that. That's the reality of life for a lot of the young children. If they stayed in their villages, they'd be working in the fields from 4, 5, 6 years old, and predominantly it's a lot of the women that do the field work, and a lot of the guys are going off and growing up the mountains and tending the herd, and so it's such a difficult life. It really is, and I think, you know, it really just bring that home, that how lucky some of these young people are to actually get that education, but then they've got this big barrier of reintegrating themselves back in the village life.
So you're finding ways to manage expectations on both sides.
Yeah, definitely, yeah, and just preparing both sides, making sure it's a safe environment, and making sure that the young people are really prepared that your parent may not be open arms and hugging you. Your brother that's a couple of years older wasn't fortunate enough to go to school may not accept you straight away. So it's giving them skills and how they can approach the brothers to say, look, all right, we are brothers and sisters, where it is. But so it just gives them skills to work together. It's really important. We help to make that easy as possible, really, for them.
Yeah, fantastic. I think this might be a good point to see if there's any questions people have around Nepal, because we're going to move on and talk about your innovations in Britain using the skills you've learned in Nepal. So shall we just say, does anybody like to ask a question? You can write it into the chat. or if you're comfortable, you could open your camera and wave at us, and we'll ask you to speak your question. Hey, Catherine, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much, and great to meet you and hear you. I have a few questions. One practical question I have is that I just wondered on this journey back that you did for 15 days with your cameras, with the young people. Were you with Sherpas, or what sort of a group were you? And were you staying in tea houses? Although presumably it was so remote that there was nowhere to stay. So were you camping? And I'm just kind of interested in in those aspects of what I would imagine was a very tough trip at times.
Yeah, it was really tough. I was on codeine for about the first 10 days because I was in so much pain with the walking. And Nima, bless him, I mean, he suffered really badly with altitude sickness. You know, he's the one that comes from the highest village. And, you know, took me by surprise, you know, a child born in those mountains, you'd think that would be kind of inherently within them to survive altitude, but he really suffered, it was quite sick. But it's beautiful as well. Like it's really tough, but it was the most amazing trip I've ever done in my life. You know, I'm going to do it again as soon as COVID lets us. So it was both things. It was very tough and very beautiful. Just to be somewhere so remote, you know, and to be able to sign off from email and phone and everything for weeks and weeks was just gorgeous. And the way we did it actually was just really small. There were only ever 2 of us on the journey. So I went backwards and forwards several times during the time that they were at home. And I would kind of, Serengeti, the girl, comes from Humla, which is next but one to Dolpo, and but you fly there from the same sort of hub in southern Nepal, so it's sort of fly up to Himalayan, then back down to Nepalganj, and then up to Dolpo. And there would only ever be 2 of us, just with really pared back camera equipment, pared back personal equipment and camping equipment. Most of the time we spent camping, and then we had either porters or donkeys. So in Humla we had porters. Basically the same as Sherpas, but Sherpas, they only call them Sherpas over in eastern Nepal, because again, they're like a specific tribe, a bit like Phil was saying about the Gurkas. So, but they do the same job as Sherpas, but they're called porters in western Nepal. And we had 3 porters carrying all of our stuff. And then we had Serengeti with us and a couple of other students as well, who were also kind of behind the camera. So we had like 6 students in total, but only 3 of them were actually featured in front of camera. And then in Dolpo, we had 3 donkeys and a donkey man who was in charge of our donkeys, carrying all our equipment. And then the same thing, just 2 people doing all the filming. So we literally had, in terms of cameras, it was like kind of DSLR cameras, which are like the big stills cameras that are capable of doing film, and then like a little mini Steadicam. It's about, I can't quite fit it on my screen, but not much bigger than that. And then some GoPros and our solar chargers. So we really, and some microphones. So we really kept it quite small. And and various other kind of stills cameras, and even iPhones at some points. I was actually really impressed at the iPhone quality, because a few shots we managed to blow up and show on massive cinema screens, and it holds up. You can't actually spot those shots. So yeah, so kind of whatever we could get, because a lot of the time we were walking, so we were on a relatively fast schedule, because we had to reach these places, but we also had to document the journey. So we were kind of, juggling cameras and just trying to catch the moments as they happened as much as possible. With our, and we also had an expedition guide with us as well, a local, who was sort of in charge of all the route planning. And he's now working with us as well at Snowland Journeys. He's sort of come in under Phil's extra expertise and being trained up.
The other question I wanted to ask, which is a sort of, maybe is a more sort of philosophical question as well, is, now that you've done this and seen what it's like and taken the young people back to their villages, and I mean, do you think overall that actually that it is something that is, for want of a better word, a sort of a good thing to be doing? or is it? It seems to me that there are so many inherent issues with it that just make it more complex as the time goes on, and I just wonder whether you're left sort of with question marks about ultimately, what is it about, in terms of sort of on a human level of the rupture that it causes, and then the dislocation, and then and then the reintegration, and what it all sort of throws up.
Yeah, definitely. I really questioned that very much at the beginning of making the film, especially in Kathmandu. I mean, seeing the school, I could see that the school was a nice school. It's like it's genuinely a warm and caring place, and those kids do see each other as family. But I really did question. I questioned, like, how important is education? Is that just us with a Western perspective, thinking that everyone has to get educated and everyone has to, have, I guess, sort of comforts and luxuries like electricity and so on. And I asked every single person I met along the way, I mean, many more than are in the film, because I really had doubts. I really don't think, there's so much about Western societies that I think are wrong. And I really didn't want to put out a film saying that education is a great thing if it's not. So really spent a lot of time agonizing over that and asking all the kids, all the parents, plus every single person we met on the way. Every time we'd stop for tea, I'd be like, what do you think? What do you think about this region? Are you happy here? Do you want to, would you want to move to the city? Would you not, just really, really kind of checking it with those people, because I think, there's also, I was aware that in a way there's like a romanticism, isn't there, that we go, oh, look at the beautiful places these people live, and look at these tribal cultures that are like thousands of years old, and let's protect them, let's make sure they don't develop, and I think sometimes we over romanticize that, because actually every single person there said that they wanted to leave. They wanted the life of more comfort. They want to have sanitation. They want communication. They want, they're in the field every day from like 6 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. And then they come in and it takes them 4 hours to make their dinner by hand. And then they go to bed, and then they do the same the next day and the next day, every day, 7 days a week for their entire life. So, they know it's hard, and also they suffer with like lack of healthcare. Average life expectancy is around 40 years old. Women often die from excessive childbirth. Men often die from excessive alcoholism, because the women in the villages tend to do all the work, and the men don't really do very much. Except sit around, sort of drinking and stuff. And so, yeah, ultimately, I really came to believe that sending these kids away for education is the best that can be done for them and for their villages, because when they go back, they form this connection. And there's one student who's from the very first year that Snowland School existed, and he's recently graduated medical school, and he's now going back to Dolpo, and he's going to be their first ever doctor in that region. And there's another student who's starting a primary school up in one of the villages in Upper Dolpo. So I do think it is tragic for both parents and children, definitely. But given the fact that those villages are so remote and teachers wouldn't live there, so there's no point building schools because you wouldn't get the teachers to, good quality teachers to go there. So I think at the moment it is definitely the best option. And we hope with Snowland Journeys to develop those villages as well. Over time, and ultimately, if the villages could be developed, then teachers would live there, then schools could be built, and then the kids could be educated close to home. So in the short term, I think it is the best thing. But there is a better solution. It's just going to take a really long time to get there, because of how remote they are, because of like the geographical challenges, because of the political instability and kind of lack of a lot of political will. Nepal has so many other issues that developing those villages is they just don't have the resources really. So yeah, I think it is a good thing.
Keith's got a question, which is about Nima particularly. He's got a question. Keith, if you'd like to show us your lovely face and ask a question, that'd be great. Oh, here you are. Hello.
I'm not sure about lovely face, but that's very kind of you. Yeah, I mean, it's about Nima, but it's also about everyone else. And you touched on this, Zara, already, having gone back after many years of not being in their home area. I mean, what does that leave them with? You spoke about some people wanting to go back and become doctors and so on, but I imagine there's also a temptation for people to think, wow, I never want to go back there. And just the contrast between Kathmandu and Upper Dorpo, I imagine is pretty tough for people. So what sort of ongoing connection or ongoing desire to live in a place like that? Do any of them want to go back really on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, I mean, I can mention Nima for once, for example. He's been back to Dolpo several times since he made the initial journey. He's also one of my trainee guides, so I trained him as a guide, and he likes the filmmaking side of things from Zara as well. And so, we're working with Nima. Nima now he sees that Upper Dolpo is really a region he sees everybody going to base camp and the circuit, all the usual tourist places. So quite a few of the students that have graduated from there that are from this area say, well, we've got stunning lakes, we've got stunning mountains, better than all across there. So let's make it a tourist area. Let's open tea houses. Let's help develop tea houses. And same with Serendiki. She wants to go and help develop, she's doing fashion now. And she wants to use traditional fabrics and traditional weaving techniques and buy materials from the villages that she can make into street fashion, so to speak. And, so they have ideas of what they want to do and develop. It's never going to be easy. Nothing ever is easy in Nepal, but they do have that ambition and passion to develop, their communities as best they can. And also, I think they really feel that bond with that connection on their culture. I mean, and Nima's father's been, he's been back to Kathmandu several times, and they do get that connection now. And I think it is hard for the kids. Some of the kids go there and think, "Wow, I can't cope with this. It's like, kids these days, I've got no mobile reception or anything." So it is difficult, and it's not going to be for every child. But I think the vast majority that I've experienced and come across do want to go back and help that circumstances. And Zara could probably add more to that.
Yeah, definitely. They do want, some of them are a bit shocked, but like I met one boy who's a year above Nima, a guy called Pema. And when I met him, he just got back from the trip the year before we made the film, and he spent a week there and said, I hate this, and came back to Kathmandu. But he's just moved there and started a nursery school. So, I think even though he hated it at the time, he's now decided that actually he really likes it, and he really wants to. They all just have this passion to improve their area, and help their people to kind of progress. And Nima, Phil mentioned that Nima's father's been to Kathmandu. That's paid for by Nima. Nima got a job as a waiter alongside his trekking and his film school studies. And his father needed to come. He managed to meet his father a couple of years ago, and he then managed to pay for his father to come and go to hospital in Kathmandu. So they're definitely like that going home trip. It does form a bond that lasts. But I haven't heard. There's one child she's the teacher in the film. Her family is quite an abusive family, so she has no desire to go back. But that's because her father was an alcoholic that beat her and her mother, and so when she went home, she had a really difficult time. I'll just tell you a story about her, actually, that she told me. And again, this was her going home journey, so we couldn't put it in the film. But she said when she went home after school, her father took a wine bottle and he slammed it on the table. And he said, okay, so now you've been to school. You must be able to read. Tell me what this wine bottle says. And so she looks at it and she's like, well, I can't, Dad, because this is in Chinese. And I don't speak Chinese. I speak Nepali and I can speak English, but I don't speak Chinese. And he was furious with her. He's like, you lied to me. You've been lazy at school all these years. You haven't bothered to learn. Oh my God, what's it been for? And that's because he didn't believe her when she told him that there was more than one language in the world. And I think that's just so perfectly kind of illustrates how remote these places are, that he didn't even know that he's part of a country called Nepal that has its own language, and that China's a separate country with a separate language. So she's the only one really who hasn't gone home. All of the others, whose vast majority of them, their families are just too poor, and that's why they've wanted to send them away for their education, to help them. And all of those ones have wanted to go back and do something to help those areas.
That's so vivid, that description of that interaction. Well, we're coming to quarter to the hour, and I would love to hear, Phil and Zara, about how you've pivoted this work from Nepal into the people in need in our own country. And would you like to say a little bit about how that happened and what's going on? Thank you, Keith, for your question, by the way. So, Phil or Zara?
Zara.
Okay, yeah, so basically when the film came out, we had a lot of teenagers coming up to us at screenings and a lot of teachers saying, I really want my children to see this film in school, both state schools and private schools, you know. In some teachers with kind of more challenging schools, they'd say, you know, my children, my students don't care about their education. I really want them to see this film because I want them to see what lengths young people in Nepal go to achieve their education and how much they value their education. And then we'd have teachers from private schools coming up to us and saying they wanted their students to see it because their students have so much and they don't appreciate it. So we were really inundated with teachers and also teenagers saying, wow, you know, we had no idea, this is amazing. And a lot of people who said, actually, now I've seen the film, I feel a lot better about my own life and I've realized that my own problems are not quite so serious as I thought they were when I, you know, put it into comparison with how their life is. And so we started like with some friends of ours who are teachers, we started putting together like an educational pack to accompany the film. And then just as we were getting that ready, then the COVID hit and the lockdown. And then actually we were thinking about it and we realized that the Snowland kids are not just away from their family for those 12 years, but they're actually inside the school grounds for about 10 of those years because the school doesn't have enough money to take them out on day trips or anything like that. And that's why, like, as Phil was saying earlier, we're so keen to get them into the outdoors around Kathmandu before they do this journey home to prepare them. But, you know, they're basically in like a 10-year lockdown and yet they're so resilient and so optimistic when they come out of it. And obviously we're seeing a lot of trauma and a lot of mental health problems in young people in this country and around the world as a result of COVID. So we started kind of adapting all of our programs to support that. And we've actually got a little film that probably explains it quite succinctly. And we've got a couple of young people who've trialed what we're trying to do with we call them mental well-being life lessons. So probably hearing from them might explain it better than us. I think Priya had the link for that, if she's with us. Yes.
I'll share that one now.
Thanks.
Sorry, my computer is frozen. Let me see if I can.
I'm Zara, and I'd like to talk about young people and mental health in the UK.
Okay, I'll start that again. Let's see if it works now.
I'm Zara, and I'd like to talk about young people and mental health in the UK, because since the start of coronavirus, over 87% of young people have said that their mental health has got worse as a result of the restrictions and the lockdown that we've had to endure. It's a very similar situation over in Nepal with the young people that we've been working with there, except for them, their lockdown lasts for 10 years. and they come out of it with hope and resilience. It's very interesting, actually. We've been studying that and seen a need for that kind of teaching over here in the UK. So myself and my team have developed a pack to help young people overcome the mental health challenges that they're having to deal with as a result of coronavirus.
Seeing people my age on the opposite side of the world and the stuff that they go through, just being dropped off by their parents at a very young age, and then being in education without them, then having to go and obviously trek back over a week just to go see their parents after just basically not seeing them for their entire life. And it just really it really impacted me quite a lot because of like how much I take for granted, really. And just seeing like the difference between it just massively just made me think about it and just felt like how lucky I am.
It just has a massive impact on you, and even just being able to see your family, just things that you would never think that you wouldn't have, that they don't. It just makes you think how strong they are for doing that.
It's like in everyday life, which I feel that they are a problem. But then if I just think about the stuff that they have to go through, really, it minimises my problem.
It just makes your challenges seem so insignificant compared to them that it doesn't really matter. Most things you think about and things that you worry about and challenges that you do need to go over are like nothing compared to the things that they have to face. So yeah, it just thinks, oh, let me just get through this, because like they get through that and they seem to be so content with it.
I feel more grateful for the things I have, and it does make me happier when I think about the problems I have, and it just puts my problems into perspective.
Thank you, Pri. That was great. And can we just talk a little bit about one of the projects you're doing to support your UK work, which is your Gurka getaway weekend? Would you like to speak about that, Phil and Zara? We need
Phil, you're on mute, but you should talk about
off mute.
That's it, I'm on mute. I think I know this on Zoom now. I've used it that many times. I'm an expedition guy, not a Zoomish, not so strong. Yeah, I mean, so we thought, well, how can we do a fundraising weekend to help our young people across in Nepal, but also to highlight the fantastic Gurkhas that work with us in the British forces, but also the Nepali culture. And obviously they have to leave their families too. They get recruited at a young age, these Gurkha soldiers. They leave home, and there's many, many years before they can return home again. So there's a lot of similarities between the young people we work with and the Gurkhas. So there's a chance to have a weekend at Hawkwood. We're going to have some physical activities, but in a fun way. So it's going to be slightly elements of their gruesome selection that they have to go through before they even get accepted for the Gurkhas. We'll learn about life as a Gurkha soldier, what's involved in that. We'll learn about some Nepali cultures. We'll get to taste their cuisine. We'll also get to experience what they have to experience with our cuisine. So when they join the military, they have to eat military ration packs, which are much better from my days when I was in the Marines, that's for sure. So they get a chance. So it's an all immersion weekend of being a little bit of a Gurkha, but also getting a good taste of Nepali culture, in the knowledge that you're supporting these young people across in Nepal. And you'll also get a chance to see their film, and obviously Zara and I will be there, so you can ask us hundreds of questions and ask us all about life in Nepal. And we're going to try, we're not going to guarantee that it's going to work, we're going to try and link in with one of the young people in Nepal, but internet being it is and the time differences being it is, and but that would be ideal. But the main thing is we're going to get to see the Gurkhas and really experience some great Nepali culture for a weekend.
Great. I've just put into the chat the link on the Hawkwood site, and then that'll take you through to your site for the information. So if anybody'd like to click on that, they can get that onto their computer, or you can look on Snowland Journeys website or Hawkwood website if you're interested. Great. So is there anything else you, Zara and Phil, would like to share or reflect on in the next few minutes?
Maybe just to say a bit more about, you know, the sort of incredible resilience and coping mechanisms that they have over there, and how we think that can help young people and also adults as well. I mean, we're kind of developing a new program. Well, I guess parts of it will be in the Gurka getaway, but then, you know, just really working on more of that and identifying those coping strategies to improve like mental well-being. And it's certainly something like I found personally from having the journey of making the film, that I came back a lot less sort of bothered about little things like, you know, if your house is clean or your I don't know, your coffee's cold or your water's cold in your shower, and all those kinds of things, you know, all those things that we get really frustrated about in this culture, and which they just don't have. And, you know, like the kids were saying in our film, I think there's such an amazing sort of model of resilience over there. You know, we kind of order off Amazon and want things the next day and get annoyed if they don't arrive. And yeah, you know, over there they have no postal or phone service. So it's just, yeah, just to kind of highlight, I guess, those elements. And that sort of, we just feel that they're very, very inspiring. And we hope, you know, if you watch the film, hopefully you can be inspired in that way too.
Thank you. Erin had a couple of very interesting questions. I hope we can cover them in the next couple of minutes. Erin, would you like to ask the questions yourself? And we'll have to do a very swift reply, but it would be lovely to have them in the questions. There you are. Great.
Okay, I'm particularly interested in the longer term effects on both the children and the community, because it's sort of a fundamental parental input that contributes to a psychological well-being. So the fact that they're being deprived of that for 10 years is quite significant.
Yeah, it is significant, but the thing is that because the school, obviously, yes, there's an element where they do wonder about why did my parents send me away? Why didn't they love me? But because when they go back, this is why we're so determined to make sure that every child will have the chance to go back, because when they go back, they see how it is, how difficult life is, and they understand completely, like, oh, there's something wrong with me, you know, it's the fact that like
a very young child does not have the cognitive ability to be able to ration that out, let alone when they're 16. I mean, how many children have gone through the school so far?
There have been a lot. It's been going since 2002. And so far, everyone is doing really well, actually. They go on to higher education, university. Like we said, they go back, they start primary schools in the region, doctor in the region, you know. I know, I had the same.
Have there not been any less successful events?
There's a point in their life that's really tough, which is when they go to university, because they're from a low caste. Like Nepal has the caste system, kind of like our class system, but more.
I thought they were Buddhist.
Extreme. No, Nepal is a largely Hindu country. These kids are Buddhist, yeah, but they're from an ethnic minority, and they're considered quite low caste, not quite the untouchables caste, but low. And so when they go on to university, they sometimes get bullied because they come into contact with the other kids who, you know, are largely the Hindus, who are the ruling classes of Nepal, and, you know, from higher castes, basically, who don't expect children from their particular background to be at university. So some of them have been bullied, and that's been tough. And that's another reason why we've put in place a program with social workers over in Nepal as well, to support them through that transition, because it's another moment, like obviously the family is difficult, being in the school, going home, and then going to university, and that can be a tough time for them. But, you know, they do, luckily they kind of ride it through. There haven't been any terrible stories so far.
But what about the success in their parenting and I mean, I would have thought some would have had children by now.
They have, and they all pretty much without exception say that they would do the same thing, because they feel that they have genuinely, and again, this is because they get to go home, right? If they didn't go home, they wouldn't feel this way. But because they've had this opportunity to go home, they do genuinely understand, they rationalize it, they do overcome a lot of that. You know, you can reverse childhood trauma, and that going home journey does reverse a lot of the childhood trauma. You know, and it's something that we're putting into place even more and more as we get more funding for Snowland Journeys, is like more and more work with them over the years leading up to that reunion. So it's not just something they learn about when they're 16, but something that they have supported throughout their whole schooling.
One of the other things we're also trying to do is we're also looking at post support as well. So once they've done that journey home and they're coming back to university or college or back into work, that we're going to be there for several years afterwards to help them with this transition back from leaving school, transition into life, to be honest. And one of our big aims is to help them support there, whether it's psychological, physical, or get sponsorship for universities. So if they need that help, but you find these kids are pretty damn resilient. You know, this very tough culture, very resilient culture. And it's like Zara said, some of them are turning out, I mean, they're only young parents, they turn out to be damn good parents. You know, they're learning because they had such a good parenting skills when they were in the school. They were like the big brother and the big sister, and that's actually rubbed off on them. So they actually that's instilled in them at a young age whilst in the school, and they're passing that on to their children that they have, you know, back in Kathmandu community.
Thank you so much. That's a really good explanation. I think we have to end there, Erin, but thank you so much for your in-depth inquiry into the well-being of the psychological well-being. It's very important.
Very important, yeah.
Yeah. So it's everything. It's you start somewhere and you grow with it, and it looks like you're really connected, and I really appreciate the presence that you bring, Zara and Phil, to this work. It's awesome, really wonderful. So that is our conversation so far, anyway. Thank you everybody so much for coming this evening, and do follow along with the projects, the Snowland Journeys, and see how you might like to get involved. If you look in the chat, there's some little messages about keeping connected with us, and we'd love to get to know you more. So thank you all very much, and if you'd like to say goodbye, you can unmute and wave at us if you like.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
very
much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Katie, and thanks for coming, everyone.